I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: are films objective or are they subjective? And the reason I'm asking that question is because I've gone to the viewer mailbag and I received this message from Jose. Thanks for getting in touch, Jose. He says this: I've watched some of your most recent content about movies and other topics on Left Foot Media and I love what I've been watching, so I'm now a subscriber. Thank you, Jose. I really appreciate that. And then he goes on to ask this question. He includes a tweet that's come from a guy, Robert Mayer Burnett, who's involved with Collider, and he asked the question about, are films objective or subjective? And this is what the tweet says: I've never ever understood why people think film is subjective, as if each individual person gets to be the arbiter deciding whether or not something is good or bad. Great films, great stories, like truth itself, are self-evident, true to the stories they tell. Well, there's a couple of things to unpack here, Jose, in response to your question. First of all, yes, I do think that films are objective. However, they also do have a subjective component as well. So there is an objectivity about judging filmmaking, and there is also a subjective component in judging the merit of filmmaking. So, for example, you can look at something, whether it be a film or a television series, and you can say, objectively, that was really well made. I can see great acting. I can see great script writing. I can see good production values where they've put a lot of effort into the costuming, etc., etc., etc. Tells a compelling story. However, subjectively, for me personally, it's not my taste for that particular style of filmmaking or that particular type of television series. I just don't enjoy. So for me, objectively, I can see that there is a high standard there that's good, but at the same time, subjectively, I just don't enjoy it. A good example of this for me personally is Downton Abbey. Now, my wife, she loves Downton Abbey. I'm someone who can look at Downton Abbey and I can say, yes, I can see that this is a well-made, well-told story. However, at the same time, subjectively speaking, I don't enjoy it. It's just not my taste in television, so I don't enjoy it. It doesn't mean, though, that it's bad just because I don't enjoy it. On the flip side, you can also have things which objectively fail certain tests about whether or not there's excellence in filmmaking, but you can still subjectively find them quite enjoyable. So a good example of this for me is Batman v Superman. And when I talk about Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, I'm talking about the Ultimate Edition. I think the Ultimate Edition is far better than the one that was released in cinema. The one that was released in cinema is missing half an hour of essential content that really goes to the heart of the story. However, I can also look at that film and I can say, objectively, there are some flaws. There are some creative filmmaking flaws in that, but then I also look at some of the things that are great about that film, and subjectively, I really love it. And part of it is I'm a big fan of Batman. Part of it is I really love that visual styling. And a huge part of that film for me was that I think it's one of the most faithful sort of adaptations of a comic book movie where you actually looked at a film that looked like comic book frames come to life. And that's again to do with the visual sensibility. At the same time, though, I can acknowledge that objectively there are standards of filmmaking where that film didn't live up to. So you can go both ways on that issue. So there is an objective standard, and there is also subjectivity involved. However, this is the interesting thing about his tweet, the end of the tweet where he says this: great films, great stories, like truth itself, are self-evident, true to the stories they tell. Well, I would say true to the stories they tell is actually not an objective standard. He's actually imposing something that's totally subjective here. You can have a story that is told in a way that is true to the story that is being told, but objectively, it's actually really bad. So that's not really a standard. That's actually quite a subjective thing. I mean, a filmmaker couldn't produce a really rubbish film and then say, hey, look, this is really good because I've been true to the story itself. It's about more than that. There is a lot more that goes into the to judging the merit of whether or not a film is good or bad or otherwise. Ultimately, this goes to the question of whether or not art can be judged by objective standards, and I think that art can be judged by objective standards. So, for example, if someone was to defecate on a table and install that in an art museum and say, "Look, this is my beautiful piece of art. It's about the condition of man and the modern struggle in human society for success and achievement, and and trying to climb to the top of the excrement heap that is consumerism, I would say, no, that is not a piece of art. That is a table that you have defecated on. Now, you can call that art if you want to, but it's not art, because I can look at that and I can say, there is no artistry, there's no craftsmanship involved in what you've done there. Anyone can squat on a table and then say a whole lot of impressive sounding verbiage about what they think that is supposed to represent. The test, I think, of true art is whether or not it really elevates us to something that is true, good and beautiful, and whether or not there is a genuine craftsmanship and skill that is involved in creating this thing. I mean, one of the standard tests I apply is, could anybody make this thing in front of me, without much skill involved? And if they could, if you could say yes, that anyone could produce what I see in front of me without much skill involved, then I think it's pretty hard to claim that this is great art, because there is sort of an objective standard that can be applied. At the same time, there is still certain subjectivity as well about art, in the sense that there might be great pieces of art that have great craftsmanship and that really speak to something true, good and beautiful, but which you personally, you go, it's just not my style, I don't really like that, I don't like a particular artist, but I really like this artist over here, I prefer their work. The type of stuff they create and craft really speaks to me, and so on a subjective level, it's, you can see the objectivity of something you don't like, but you still see that there is merit in it, even though for you personally, it's not something that you really that enamored by. So there you go, Jose. Hopefully that's answered your question, my thoughts on the issue. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. There's a link in the description below and a link on screen at the end of this video. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you next week on The Daily Question.